The views expressed on this program are those of the producers and individuals appearing on this program and do not necessarily reflect the views of the Sun Prairie Media Center staff, its video service providers, or the staff and elected officials of the City of Sun Prairie.
Hello and welcome to Real Reviews. My name is Jameson Rabbit, and this week I am so excited to be joined by a special guest and resident Dune expert. It's Michael Seleskie.
Yachiyahuwada, long live the fighters of Muad'Dib. Jameson, I've been ready for this movie since they said it was coming out.
I know you have. You and I both. This was our most anticipated movie of, I think, the last couple of years, maybe.
Yeah, absolutely. I was bummed. I was convinced that it wasn't going to come out. Every single piece of news that we were getting for the last 5-6 months, it just felt like another delay was coming, and my poor heart couldn't take it.
Well, it's finally here,
Yep.
and we're here to talk about it. We're, of course, talking about Dune for our first film this week from director Denis Villeneuve. This is based on Frank Herbert's classic sci-fi novel that has been famously very difficult to adapt for other filmmakers. This is a story of a desert planet of Arrakis that seems like a desert wasteland, but we find, of course, that it is so much more, and it holds a treasure trove of spice, which, if you don't know, is the thing that drives this universe. It moves everything, and the House of Harkonnen has been controlling the planet of Arrakis and enslaving the native Fremen there. And at the start of this movie, the Emperor ousts the Harkonnen from this place and places the House of Atreides in charge. There's a lot going on in the story, but the Duke Leto Atreides, played by Oscar Isaac, is under a ton of pressure from the Emperor to make this new thing work, provide spice, and keep the Emperor happy. Meanwhile, his wife, the Lady Jessica, played by Rebecca Ferguson, is trying to raise their son, Paul, played by Timothée Chalamet. She's trying to raise him under the religious teachings of the Bene Gesserit, which is the religious group that she belongs with. There's treacherous dealings going on. Not everything is as it seems in this world, and it's we have our tale of this possible young messiah, Paul, set against all the interplanetary issues that would arise in dirty politics. You and I, sir, come at Dune from very different levels of fandom. You are a long-time prophet of Dune. I watched it as I read the book as a teen, and then recently revisited it, listened to the audio on kind of your urging. Just finished the book. That just amped up my excitement even more. But you've been the soothsayer of all things Dune as long as you can remember.
My uncle gave me a copy of Dune when I was 8 years old, proceeded to read it very intently, read every single subsequent work that Frank Herbert wrote, including some of the stuff that was not part of the Dune series, which is also excellent. There's an expanded universe that was carried on by his son and a few other co-creators that really has some interesting character points to it. But Dune has been my native language in literary terms for a long time. I'm a big Tolkien fan, but even more than that, I've been a Frank Herbert fan for as long as I could read. And Dune has been famously difficult to film. Thought of as too dense, too thick, too hard to get around. And I think this effort is really slimmed down to a point where you don't have to be a navigator of the Duneverse like myself to enjoy it.
It can be a little daunting when you really start to. I mean, when I would talk to you about Dune, I'd be like, "Oh boy, I don't know if this is a lot going on here."
My lectures aren't really helping it either, because if you ask somebody who really loves Dune, it's like starting up it's like putting that first drill in a well. It just, the information gushes up, and there's backstory and there's forward story. And thankfully, I think this movie slims down some of the unnecessary detritus and gets to the core of this movie, which is really about Paul going from being a character who is beset by expectations from a few different angles, and coming to a place where he's going to have to lead a desert resistance to win back what is rightfully his.
Yeah, and it's a beautiful looking film. Denis Villeneuve is just a remarkable filmmaker. I love all his films for different reasons. I think he's incredibly ambitious. I mean, he recently did the sequel, Blade Runner 2049, which was divisive for some, and I think that he's amazing at conveying a sense of location, making me understand where I am in a world. That's an underrated trait, I think, for a lot of filmmakers. When you get into really dense material, trying to help you navigate where you are in this world, who belongs to what. I never feel uncertain about it. And he shoots beautiful looking films. There are many shots in this film I want hanging in my living room just because they're gorgeous looking shots. The ability to take a desert and make it look beautiful and to make it look lived in, but actually gorgeous, is difficult.
Yeah, and this book series outspans about 25,000 years, and the real main character of the whole series is the planet. And he does such a great job of showing Dune as a planet devoid of moisture. We see the little semblance of green that just pops off of the screen when it shows up. And to add the sand in the particle effects that he does, that almost makes it feel like water. I walked out of that movie almost dry rubbing my arm, going, I really need to take a shower, but I need to conserve my water while I'm doing it. I thought he did a really good job. I've loved some of his work. He did one of my favorite sci-fi movies of the last 10 years. He did Arrival, which was another really moody sort of movie, but you come out of it feeling, and the whole crux of that movie is about language. And a lot of this is about language too. The Atreides speak in a different language than the Harkonnens speak, and they convey it so well. It does feel very lived in. It feels organic, which is something on a dense material like this can sometimes be very difficult to show on the screen.
Because lesser filmmakers will get bogged down in trying to hold your hand, explain things to you.
Absolutely, and in fact, I think the most widely regarded filmed adaptation of this, the 1984 version, famously starts off with about 10 minutes of straight-up exposition.
Yeah, just
an exposition
hard to
dump,
get into immediately.
And you go, well, thanks for setting the table, but now I don't even know if I want to eat the meal.
Exactly. Yeah, that's a hard one to jump into. I think this film a lot of it also really lives or dies on the performances. And I think the three leads, all of the Atreides family, Oscar Isaac, Rebecca Ferguson, Timothée Chalamet, I think all of them really pulled their weight in this movie, really made me care and believe about this family.
Yeah, Oscar Isaac's portrayal of Duke Atreides might be my favorite of any.
He's exactly what I envisioned.
Absolutely. Beset by honor. My only fault with that is that we don't really get the chance to see his interplay with the Lady Jessica, with Gurney Halleck, with Duncan Idaho.
We barely get Gurney Halleck in this movie.
Well, he's... You take the guy who was playing Thanos and you say, hey, I'm going to shove you in the back of this movie.
Yeah.
You're going to have about 3 lines and you're going to get to look cool. But no, I think they did a really great job with the Duke. Paul starts off as being a petulant teenager, beset by issues. He ends up being a slightly less petulant teenager, which I think is my biggest downfall with the movie, is that you really don't get, if Paul is your main character, there isn't a whole lot of character arc to him. Most of his arc is developed in the next movie, which thankfully we got word that they were going to greenlit.
Right,
at the time, when we all sat down to watch it, popcorn in hand, and it came across the screen, the Chiron said this is part 1, we all kind of went, well, we really hope there's a part 2, otherwise
really
this is calling your shot and not winning.
There's a moment towards the end of this film, and I'm not going to spoil it, but there's a moment towards the end of the film where Paul has to make a decision that is very powerful for his character, and it kind of bothered me that they didn't give it enough gravity. I felt like that his decision at the end of this film and how that affects his character going forward, especially how his mother sees him and sees the pain that he has to go through to make this decision. I was hoping there's a little more gravity in that in this film.
You know, that decision that he makes, it sets him up for the rest of the scene. And in most theatrical adaptations of the book, it is presaged in one of the early scenes that we have where he's fighting with Gurney Halleck and telling him that, hey, there's going to be a time where you're not going to be training to fight. You're going to have to fight.
Not in the mood?
If you're not, it famously, fighting is not a thing for, fighting is not a mood. It's for cattle and lovemaking, and it's well off put, but, you know, the movie does, I think, a really good job of using some of those early scenes as exposition without the exposition dump. You never are told what the personal screens, the personal shields
Yeah.
are, but it's so very well visually represented where you can see that if you're going too fast, the screen, the personal shield is going to
It
stop
just takes a
you.
small thing of him saying the slow blade
Yep.
gets through the shield.
And
Okay, I get it.
Yep, and then they show. They don't necessarily sit down and tell you, well, hey, this is the limitations of the personal shield that you're wearing. They don't have to say that.
Yeah.
And that, I think, is a testament to Villeneuve's ability to put that exposition onto the screen and not necessarily into text.
And using flashbacks and, I guess, flash forwards
Yep.
in this movie, visions, and I thought he used them well.
Mm-hmm.
A little confusing for some probably, if you don't know what to expect.
I will say that apparently, if you've got very good audio quality at home, if you are going to sit down and watch this movie at home, and I think both of us agree that if you have the opportunity and can safely do it, go see it in a movie theater
Right.
with as big of a screen as you can get your hands on. But I think there is some aspect to his, to our main character's Paul, his ability to deal with the spice is kind of opening up latent psychotropic energies and the ability to do things with his mind. If you've got really good audio quality equipment at home, you get to hear some of the things that are going through his head. And if you're watching in a movie theater, you're going to hear some of the voices that are prompting Paul to do what he's doing. And if you've got a lower quality audio system at home, you might not hear it.
I picked some of that up on my third watch of this
Yep.
film.
Good for you. That's what? That's putting in almost 9 hours at this
Something
point
like
for
that,
you?
yeah. Spoiler alert, I like the movie.
Yeah, I think we both really enjoyed the movie. And they do, like I say, the bigger screen that you can get, the better you can get. It is gorgeous.
Yeah.
Some of the visual work that they do, Arrakis is so striking as a place to set this, what is essentially a Greek tragedy. The Atreides are loosely based off of a Greek tragedy. And you even see that in some of the little things that you've never seen in a theatrical representation of Dune. The fact that the Atreides fighters fight in a phalanx. That's never described in the book, but you think the family is sort of based off of a Greek family. They would fight in a phalanx. So I was really happy to see that. I was not excited to see bagpipes. I had no idea what bagpipes were doing there. But that's neither here nor there.
Little touches here and there. Just a good-looking movie, and I mean, of course, it's got Jason Momoa, and it's going to be good-looking. I mean, geez.
Yeah, that was the big draw for my wife as well. When I told her that Jason Momoa was going to be in this, she said, "I'll watch anything with him."
Real quickly, you are the big fan, and sometimes the biggest fans are the harshest critics, right? You've ruined my thing. I'm curious, without getting any spoilers, though, how satisfied are you with where they cut off this movie for the second half?
The thing about Dune is that it's really action heavy in the first third of the book. It's really action heavy in the second third of the book. In the middle third of the book, much like the planet itself, it's kind of a dry, long slog until you get toward the real character development. So if you're going to decide that you're going to make it into 2 movies, you've kind of got to cut that somewhere in the middle. And I think they've cut it off in as good a place as you're going to get. The problem is you're not going to get a whole lot of character development for Timothée Chalamet's Paul Atreides character. And I think the movie does suffer from that. I think they cut it off in one of the very few places that has some action in the middle of this book where they really could have cut it off. So, yeah, you walk out feeling a little bit unsatisfied with the ending. And that's the only reason I didn't give it a perfect score, is that it's tough to end the movie there, but it has to be done.
Well, let's get into that. What did you end up giving Dune?
I gave Dune 4 out of 5.
Nice. And I love it. I have enjoyed this movie more every time I've watched it. I end up giving it 4.5 out of 5 stars. We both highly recommend Dune. Again, see it on the biggest screen possible, but just see it and discover where a lot of your sci-fi franchises got their ideas, because Dune is pretty influential if you read about it. But highly recommend Dune. Let's move ahead, though, to what we have next on our marquee. Sir, what do you have for us?
We're going to be reviewing a movie called Ron's Gone Wrong,
Ooh.
which is an animated film that you can see out in the theater right now. It's about the only place you can see it. It's not streaming anywhere, which is probably to its benefit. Ron's Gone Wrong is either the heartfelt, charming story of a friendship between a young misfit and his faulty robot companion, or the horrifying look into a not-too-distant future dystopia wherein a soulless corporate conglomerate has created a product directly marketed towards children with the not-so-hidden purpose of spying on and eventually selling goods and services to those kids. Either interpretation is entirely valid. All jokes aside, Barney, voiced by Jack Dylan Grazer, is the only kid at school without the latest tech craze, the Bee-Bot, produced by Bubble Tech. His quirky family doesn't quite have the money for the expensive robot, but is able to procure a scratched and dented model voiced by Zach Galifianakis. Hilarity ensues as the robot bonds with its owner, but not quite in the way that everybody else's does. This causes problems for Bubble Tech, which replaces their idealistic CEO with the new, financially obsessed CEO, who happily uses the ubiquitous robots to spy on the children that they've been bonded to. Barney, his robot companion Ron, along with a large cast of colorful and entertaining friends and family, will have to band together to save the town, the company, and maybe remind each other of the humanity in all of us. I liked this movie a lot. I think this movie is a lot better than it had any right to be. I thought the humor was on point.
Sure. Yeah.
The first time I saw a preview for this movie, I thought it was going to be middle of the road, sort of made for kids tripe.
I agree.
That's not what this turns out to be. I'm not sure that young kids are going to enjoy this anything more than just the colorful spectacle of it. There's a lot of deep humor in this. It was very enjoyable for myself to go watch it. So I can't recommend this movie enough. It was a very pleasant surprise for me.
I love that. I brought my 8-year-old daughter to it. She was very excited. And she normally is very effusive. Pretty much any animated movie we go to, we walk out, this is my new favorite movie. She's like, yeah, it was good. You know, so to your point, yeah, I don't think that it really delivered what she was looking for. I was surprised that by some of the messages in here. You know, that because Barney he's the odd one out, right? So you have your obvious message of, we need to embrace the strange and, you know, and maybe not look down on everybody who isn't just like us and blah, blah. It's the obvious message. But there's the foreboding message of, what are we allowing these big tech companies to do? They're telling us who we can be friends with. They're taking these Bee-Bots, they're using these marketing to children, using their social media presences to maneuver how to deliver things to them. And I'm like, oh yeah, that's not a dystopian future.
Yeah, no,
that's terrifying.
If this movie would have come out 5 years ago, we'd have called it prescient. Because I feel like we're inching closer to a society where we're going to have something like this. In fact, there was something marketed in the screening that I showed where they had a animatropic robot that you could bring to the kids, that you could have the kids and you could plug its name in and it could play games with it. I thought, God, that's a really odd choice, especially after watching the movie. I thought that's a weird, choice to be thrown in front of this movie. But I really enjoyed some of the in-jokes that you get. I enjoy the fact that, you know, everyone's connected, but at the same time, you know, it has something to say in the system where everyone's connected through their devices. They've all got their personal robots. They go out to recess, and nobody's communicating with each other. They're communicating with each other through their robots.
Yeah.
Which, you know, it's not subtle. They're not trying to hide their intent. It's very much nail on the head. But I think that point comes across.
Especially when, I mean, I kind of appreciated almost like this barbed satire of, kids are just connected to their devices, blah, blah, blah. And so we're going to use that to alienate it. Basically tell them not to have human interaction. All you need is what we're giving you. Don't have, we're trying to make you not have human interaction. Everything you need is right here in this thing that we're giving you. And then there's the really scary story of Savannah, the popular girl who's a social media influencer in the school. And you think, she's not the likable character. She's just worried about herself and blah, blah. And then when a video of her gets uploaded that is embarrassing to her, suddenly she's ruined. And you see the dark side of the internet put on a child. And it's horrifying.
The second half of that movie is really tough for Savannah.
It's tough. And it's unflattering. You see how this happens a lot now. You see more and more TikTok stars, YouTube stars that don't have great endings recently. And you see this pattern of how this can really ruin a kid.
Especially,
and it's horrifying.
Yeah, as you look at it, when adults are getting into this thing, it's one thing. But when we're allowing kids unfiltered access to immense positive feedback, and when the scale gets turned, immense negative feedback.
Can you cope with that?
Can you cope with it? I don't think a lot of kids are prepared for it. This movie has a lot to say about, overarching tech companies that are clearly providing some sort of good. The CEO that's in charge of Bubble Tech at the beginning, he's clearly young, idealistic. He's got a vision that all of these people are going to be connected through these devices and it's going to be a net good. And so easily his algorithm, which is like the second or third movie I think I've seen this year where the algorithm is the enemy.
Yeah, right.
I think it's the second movie that I've seen this year where there's actually a climactic action scene that takes place in a room full of servers.
Absolutely.
And this movie has a lot to say about the evils of overarching tech conglomerates that I think society has finally come around to that point of view. If it's not always been for certain people, but
I love that message coming from the world's largest conglomerate.
Yeah, it's almost like they made it difficult to find that Disney has some fingerprints on this movie.
Very much so.
It comes out through a subsidiary of Fox, through a couple different third parties. So don't worry, corporations aren't the bad guy in this movie, entirely produced by the Disney Corporation.
Absolutely. Curious what you ended up giving Ron's Gone Wrong.
I loved this movie. I gave it 4 out of 5. I can't say enough about it. I can't wait to show it to anybody that'll have the chance to sit down and watch it with me.
I love it. I ended up giving it 3 stars. I enjoyed it. Wasn't blown away by it. Our discussion makes me want to bump it up just a half a star.
Yeah, maybe. My score might have been bumped up by the fact that I was the only guy in the movie theater, and I don't know how you feel about it when you're the only guy in the movie theater.
I'm all for it. I'm
it's
that guy
always
all
the
the
best.
time. I'm that guy way too often. Somebody needs a B-bot because I don't have a friend. Let's move ahead, though, sir. What we have for our streaming spotlight this week. It is a film that comes to us from France. It is called Titane. Or Titanium in French, from director Julia Ducournau, stars Agatha Roussel as Alexia. This is a French body horror film like no other. The synopsis of this movie is perhaps the most difficult to explain that I can remember. I've tried explaining this to people.
Buckle in.
And it sounds like a fever dream. Alexia, as a child, is involved in a horrific car wreck. She wakes up with a titanium plate in her head. We see her go home as a child after this accident, and she seems drawn to the family car suddenly in a very strange way. Cut to her as an adult. Now she's dancing. She's a dancer with a large scar on her head where the metal plate is. She is attacked in the parking lot of this club, and she stabs the man who is trying to get frisky with her. Stabs him in the ear with a large hairpin, think knitting needle, right in the old ear. And this is when things start to get real weird, about 8 minutes into this movie. We get more stabbings. We find out that this is her thing. She likes putting this needle into people. And now she's on the run. And Alexia cuts her hair. She gets an ace bandage and binds her breasts. And in one of the more horrifying scenes I've seen this year, also breaks her nose to try and look like somebody else. And the nose break is not quick. That feels like about a 2-minute scene of her attempting to break her nose over and over.
Yeah.
You feel it. And now she's out. She is posing as a missing boy, Adrian, who had gone missing years before. She's posing as him. She is taken in by Adrian's father, who is a fire captain named Vincent, who is distraught and hopeful that this is his son. He's a lonely, sad man. His wife has left him. He really wants to believe this is his son, but it becomes apparent to all that it's not his son when she begins showing signs of being rather pregnant in a pregnancy that she tried to abort with the said big knitting needle in a very graphic scene as well. And then it gets even weirder. He knows that this isn't his son, but he's willing to carry on the charade because he needs her. He needs, I think, what she represents. She fills a void. It's really sad, his existence. This movie is filled with gore, body horror throughout the film, and it is not an easy watch at all.
No, it is a very, very difficult watch. I feel bad for my wife, who kind of walked in the middle of my viewing it, and I had to try to somewhat explain the plot to her, and I couldn't believe the things that were coming out of my mouth, and she didn't stick around, probably to her benefit.
Yeah, absolutely.
Much like the titular main character, I feel like this is two movies sort of grafted onto one movie's body. You've got the first quarter of the movie wherein she's a serial killer that's running around trying to evade the local police, changing her looks, breaking her own nose quite visibly. And then you have the second half of the movie wherein she's going to impersonate this poor firefighter's lost kid who's been lost for quite a long time, who everyone else who runs into everyone else who runs into the girl goes, that is not your son. That clearly cannot be your son. But I think there's a level of sad delusion that he's gotten to in his depths of despair, that he's willing to cling on to anything. If there's one sympathetic character in this movie, it's clearly the fire chief and his crew of firemen that are around him, who clearly have his best, intentions in heart, but who don't. This movie is really tough. I had a tough time watching it.
I gave this movie for you to watch, and then I started watching it, and I almost texted you like, I don't know, buddy. I don't know. But they're like, yeah, we're going to go forward with it. I've heard good things. I appreciate what Ducournau sets out to do. She is great at making you uncomfortable. She did in her previous film, Raw, about a young girl who becomes a cannibal when she goes to college.
Mission accomplished.
Yeah. She broaches things that aren't easy. And yeah, I'm not a fan of body horror. I'm not a fan of gore for gore's sake. But there's something about this movie I couldn't take my eyes off. There's something about Agatha Russell that she's stuck in her head. She's very malleable in this movie in very weird ways.
If there's a reason that you can't take your eyes off of the screen, it's because the entire thing is in French, and unless you're a native French speaker, you've got to be watching the screen to know what's going on.
Touché, sir.
Because you're reading subtitles the whole movie, and if that's not your thing, I get it. I think you're limiting yourself to some really great foreign films out there. I don't consider this to be a great foreign film. It is gorgeous. There's a lot of really neat elements at night with different colors. It's a very, there are some scenes in this movie that will stay with you probably for as long as you have memory.
I will agree with that.
There are some images that I, for all of my time in the confessional, will never come out of my head.
Yeah, I did watch this through some fingers covering my eyes. There's a couple of scenes.
And I love horror. I don't consider this to be horror.
No, it's body
horror. Yeah. The premise of the movie isn't all that scary. And I do think they drop the fact that she's clearly a serial killer.
Well, and the best part is, I didn't even tell you the crazy part about this movie. I mean, there's some stuff that happens. There's motor oil and stuff coming out, and there's things that are unexplainable in this movie. And I don't want to get into it because you should watch it.
This is a family program.
What did you end up giving Titane?
If there was a number, I gave it 1 star. Mostly because I don't think that everybody has a reason to see every movie. I think there's something for everybody, and it's not wasted time to watch this. There is not a time where I'm going to willingly pop this into the old DVD player and watch it again for no time.
You and I are far apart, but I do not disagree with you because I can definitely see how this is not for most people. But I gave it 3.5 stars. I couldn't stop watching it. It sat in my head afterwards, but
for all the wrong reasons.
If you don't like body horror, don't watch the movie.
No,
it's horrifying to watch. But all right, let's move ahead, sir, really quickly with what we have coming soon. In a week, we have The Eternals, the newest Marvel movie. New Marvel heroes are going to arrive on the scene. You want to check that out. We also have Spencer, which stars Kristen Stewart, who is becoming Princess Di. Feels like we're getting a lot of Princess Di stuff going on here in the last year or so, but Kristen Stewart is going to take her swing at it. And streaming, we have a film called The Harder They Fall, a Western starring Idris Elba and Regina King, and a whole amazing cast. Those are the films that are coming soon. Before we go any further, we want to thank our sponsors, Old Marcus Theaters, the Palace here in Sun Prairie. Thank you for sponsoring this program. Thank you for welcoming us in. Last week, we got to sit in the confines of the Palace for the show. It's always enjoyable. We always recommend you checking out a Dream Lounger if you're going to watch a movie. Next week, I'm going to be talking about The French Dispatch, Last Night in Soho, Antlers, and Army of Thieves. Guest TBD. Tune in to find out who. Sir, I want to thank you again, though, for joining me. Always a pleasure. You did not disappoint with your Dune thoughts.
Well, I look forward to the next movies. I love Dune. I can't wait to see part 2. Hopefully we get to see it sooner rather than later, but I hope you'll have me on in the future.
Absolutely. And you got a movie that you weren't expecting to really enjoy.
Absolutely.
That's a win-win right there.
That is a win.
Absolutely. All right, well, thank you again. Till next week, though, I'm Jameson.
And I'm Michael.
Thanks for watching.